本日午前の部の司会を務めさせていただきます日本体育大学の矢野と申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。まず会に先立ちまして主催団体を代表して日本体育大学コーチング学教授の伊藤正光よりご挨拶いたします。伊藤先生、よろしくお願いいたします。
はい、皆さん、聞こえてますでしょうか。大丈夫かな。はい、おはようございます。本日は日本体育大学、女性スポーツフォーラムにお集まりいただきありがとうございます。ちょっと画面をですね、シェアさせていただきます。はい。はい、私はですね、午前中の部を担当するスポーツ庁委託事業、女性エリートコーチ育成プログラムのですね、本学の責任者を拝命しております、伊藤正光です。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。簡単に私から本事業の概要について、お話をさせていただきます。本事業はこの、お見せしております名前からお分かりのように、将来ナショナルチーム等のハイパフォーマンススポーツの女性指導者を育成するもので、スポーツ庁の委託事業で行われております。この表を見ていただきますと分かるんですけども、これは日本スポーツ協会の公認スポーツ指導者の男女比です。女性の方が圧倒的に数が少ないことが分かります。オリンピック、あるいはパラリンピックの代表コーチに関しても、同様に男性に比べて女性の数が少ないことが分かります。女性が活躍する社会づくりももちろんなんですけども、この女性コーチが少ないという状況が多くのアスリートにとって不利益となっているということは明らかだと思います。もちろん国としてもなんとかこの状況を打開しようとしていますし、我々日本体育大学としても女性コーチを育成するということは、大学のミッション、ビジョンと一致しておりまして、この事業に展開しようと手を挙げさせていただいた次第です。このプログラムは今回3期目になっております。第1期、第2期につきましては、日本スポーツ振興センター JSC さんが運営してまいりましたけども、私たち日体大のコーチング学のチームが第2期に JSC のプロジェクトに参加させていただいて、第3期である今年度と来年度、この2年間のプログラムなんですけども、この2年間を日本体育大学で担当させていただくことになりました。公募によって選ばれた12名のコーチが今年度すでに4回の研修を終えております。このプログラムでは研修会に代表される公式学習機会、フォーマルラーニングと呼びますけども、そういう機会と研修等で学んだことを実際に現場で使ってみるオン・ザ・ジョブトレーニング、コーチングやキャリアについて相談できるメンタリング、コーチの仲間たちが集まって共に刺激し合ってコーチングスキルを高めていく実践コミュニティ作り、これらを統合させたブレンド型学習機会を提供しています。メンタリングっていう言葉をですね、初めてお聞きになった方もいるのではないかと思いますけども、メンターという名の、知識とか経験を豊かな人がですね、対象コーチの相談役として位置づいておりまして、定期的に個別の相談に乗るシステムを導入しています。このプログラムでは、1人のコーチに対してコーチングメンターとキャリアメンターという2名を配置しておりまして、コーチングメンターはコーチデベロッパーと言われるコーチを育成する役割の人材が務めています。キャリアメンターはビジネス界でさまざまな荒波を乗り越えて実績を上げてこられたすでにもう管理職になられているような、そういう女性の方に務めていただいておりまして、さまざまなコーチングそのものと自分のキャリアを確固たるものにしていくというところ、両方の側面でサポートできるようにしております。この他にもさまざまな側面からたくさんのプログラムを展開しているんですが、今ここにお見せいたしましたのが、今年のプログラムの様子なんですが、コロナ禍の影響によって今年度は一度もですね、対面式でやったことがなくて、4回行いました。すべてがオンラインで開催したということになっています。ここに表情が出ておりますけれども、非常に皆さん笑顔でですね、楽しく研修に参加していただいております。その他にも我々の哲学観でもあるんですけども、やはりコーチの学びというものは誰か我々のシステムを作っている側が何かを勉強させるとかそういうことではなくて、コーチが学びの主導権を握っていくということが僕たちのプログラムの特徴であるかと思います。さまざまなものをブレンドしながらやっているという状況になっております。はい。 でこの、女性のですね、このプログラムを受講している方々、この午前中の最後には、このプログラムで学ぶコーチたちに実際に登壇してもらって、このプログラムにかける思いやビジョンなどを話していただく予定になっておりますので、楽しみにしていてください。でこの女性コーチ活躍のムーブメントというのは、日本だけではなくて、もちろん世界的な規模で展開されています。今日は国内外でそのムーブメントを牽引する方々にお越しいただいておりますので、グローバルな視点を持って、そして日本に適したやり方を模索していく、その手がかりがこの今日の午前中のプログラムで見つかれば幸いと思っております。ぜひ最後までお楽しみいただければと思います。簡単ではありますけれども、スポーツ庁委託事業、女性エリートコーチ育成プログラムの概要の説明を終わらせていただきます。では矢野さんにも戻したいと思います。
はい、ありがとうございました。続きまして、私の方から本日の全般日程を説明させていただきます。一度画面を共有させていただきます。はい。ただいま共有いたしました画面をご覧ください。本日は大きく午前と午後に分かれております。午前に行われる女性エリートコーチ育成プログラム国際ショーケースカンファレンスにつきましては、向かって左側に記載してあります通り、3部構成となっております。第1部と第2部は、Creating a Sportive Environment for Female Coaches と題しまして、パネルディスカッションを行います。第1部では、国際的に女性コーチ普及の最前線で活躍されているポーリーン・ハリソンさんと、コーチとして顕著な成績を収められてきたヘレン・ウィルソンさん、そしてケイティ・サドラーさんをお招きして、国際的な視点から女性コーチの現状について語っていただきたいと思っております。第1部では同時通訳もうすでについているんですけども、つきますので、Zoom の機能をご活用ください。続きまして、第2部では、国内に目を向けまして、女性コーチの普及を牽引していらっしゃる、自転車競技連盟の三宮恵理子さん、そしてボッチャ協会の村上光輝さんをお招きして、国内の女性コーチの現状について語っていただきます。そして最後の第3部では、女性エリートコーチを目指す私たちの挑戦と題しまして、プログラムを受講中の女性コーチ6名が、プログラムで得た学びやチャレンジの内容についてプレゼンテーションを行います。以上、簡単ではありますが、私の方から午前中のカンファレンスの概要について説明を終わります。なお、第1部および第2部では、皆様からのご質問にもお答えする時間を取りたいと思っております。Zoom の Q&A 機能から、ぜひ質問をお寄せいただきたいと思います。すべての、質問にですね、お答えできない場合もございますので、その点、あらかじめご了承いただければと思います。はい。それでは早速、第1部をスタートしていきたいと思います。最初のセッションは、ポーリン・ハリソンさんにファシリテーターをお願いしております。ポーリンさん、Are you ready? OK かな？はい。それでは、ポーリンさん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Arigatou gozaimasu, Hiraki. And Ohio in Tokyo, Minasama. Konnichiwa in New Zealand. Masa, firstly, congratulations on organizing this amazing event. You are truly an exceptional male champion for gender equality, and we wish there were many more like you around the world. So many thanks. This session will explore what is needed to create an environment that supports, encourages, and values female coaches. And before we start, I would just like to talk to you a little bit about the ICCE program. Can you move it forward, Masa? Thank you. So the International Council for Coaching Excellence started a call to action about 10 years ago to create a step change in diversity in elite coaching. The global vision of the ICCE is to close the gender gap in coaching and create diverse and inclusive coaching teams. And over the last 10 years, many national and international initiatives have been working towards this goal, including your very own elite female coach development program in Tokyo that Masa has just explained. And I've had the privilege of working with Masa on this really exciting program. But there's still a long way to go. We do know the problems, and we've talked about them long and hard. And now we need to find and share the solutions. We need to face the facts that women coaches exist in a sporting landscape that's dominated by men in every position, every sport, and every organization around the globe. And within this system, many women coaches do not feel supported or valued. There's been plenty of research on this topic, but what has not been clearly articulated is what creates that environment, that culture that truly supports and encourages female coaches. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today in this session. So I'd like to introduce my two partners in crime, Keiti Sadlier and Helene Wilson. And before we start, just so the audience gets to know a little bit about us, I'd like to start by asking, I'll ask you, Keiti, how you started on your journey. You're a very successful female administrator in sport. And now you are the general manager for World Rugby, working on women's rugby. And you've had a journey from being an Olympic athlete in synchronized swimming and worked your way through the administration channels to where you are now. Perhaps you'd just like to share with us any little breakthrough moments that you have had in your career.
Arigato gozaimasu. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate in what is truly a world-class seminar for women in coaching. So I would like to congratulate the Nippon University for having this initiative. It's fantastic. My background, I kind of transitioned out of being an athlete into an administrator at a very young age. I think I was 23. So as soon as I kind of finished my Olympic and Commonwealth Games journey, I transferred onto boards. And I think, and then I have had the privilege of working for 30 years now plus in setting up the New Zealand high performance system. And now I work in Ireland, working on women's rugby. The biggest, the thing that has helped me along that way is identifying really good people that can work alongside you. So, you know, from whether that's you as a coach or me as an administrator, creating that kind of network of people that support you, that make sure they tell you when you're doing things right or when you're off key, but that they're there to check and challenge you and help you along the way. And that's why having a great network of support is really important for young coaches and elite coaches.
Thank you, Keiti. And the point you make is really important because we know that women lag behind men in their ability to network and find support networks. So that's a really important factor. And Helene Wilson is head coach of a top netball team here in New Zealand, and she'll talk a little bit about the sport of netball a bit later on. But Helene is working in this area of supporting other female coaches for a number of years and has huge experience to bring to this debate. Helene, tell us a little bit about your background and how you've managed to break through in your career.
Yes, thanks. Firstly, thanks for having me here. I'm very humbled to be speaking to our audience today. So I'm very excited to share my passion of coaching with you all. My coaching journey began when I was at school. I was a premier netball player in my school, and my coach at the time made all of us coach a school team. So I felt very lucky that I was introduced to coaching when I was 15 years old, and I've never stopped since. So that's how I got into coaching. And my love of sport took me on a journey of into phys ed teaching, or physical education, as a teacher. And I continued coaching and experientially learning about coaching as I got older. I think the breakthrough moment for me and how I ended up in the high performance space was when I met a person who would later become a mentor to me, that supported my growth and development into high performance. And at the time when I met her, she was a former Silver Ferns coach of New Zealand, our international team. And she had a conversation with me about my coaching and where I was at. And it was really honest and real. And it opened up my eyes to a whole new world of self-awareness about the skills that are required to be a high performance coach. So I really am grateful to her that about 10, 15 years ago, that I had someone who I could support me and help me on my journey of learning and self-awareness as a coach. And that opens up networks.
Fantastic. Thank you, Helene. And really interesting that both of you independently have identified the need to have support network and actual mentors in your careers, because we know that's one of the key ways that women gain confidence and feel supported and are able to see a role model in their own development. So thank you very much, both of you. So now, Katie, I'm going to ask you to spend 10 minutes or so just presenting what World Rugby are doing to achieve gender diversity in coaching. And if I could just remind the audience that if you want to make any comment or ask questions, to place them in the Q&A box on your screens, and then we can perhaps ask some of those questions a bit later on. So over to you, Katie.
Thank you. I might get Masa to put my slides up, my first slide. So our diversity in coaching journey has been reasonably recent. You know, I started at World Rugby in 2017, and we had a big vision to transform World Rugby to normalize women's involvement in rugby on and off the field. And at that time, we were very much a male-dominated organization. We had a council that oversaw everything that we did, that was made up of only men, so 30 men. But when we made the commitment to move towards gender diversity, we added 17 women directors onto the board of World Rugby. And that was the impetus to look at leadership development around the globe. So in 2017, we had a look at what was going on in coaching. And at that stage, we were heading into a World Cup in Ireland. Japan was there. And this was the Women's World Cup. And there was only one country in the world at that stage in the 15s game or the 7s game that had a woman in a head coach situation. So we knew, when I look at your statistics that Masa presented, we were in a far worse situation for the sport of rugby. So we did a review and we said, I might move to the next slide, Masa. So we did a review and we decided that diversity in coaching, if diversity was important in the board and in senior leadership, we needed to drive diversity in coaching. And we set some targets about where we wanted to be by 2025. So not the next Rugby World Cup, which is in New Zealand this year, but by the World Cup after that. We wanted coaches, women who are coaching at a high performance coach level, to be just called high performance coaches, not woman high performance coaches. So dropping the gender was important. But to do that, we needed to go through cultural change. And most importantly, we were stressing that we want to see diversity in coaching teams. So we're driving a pool of women to be involved in coaching at the highest level, not just coaching women's teams, but coaching men's teams and being critical as part of that diversity. So we'll move to the next slide. Thank you. So in looking, there's a lot of people that have written about the challenges that exist for women in coaching. So the list that is before you on this slide hopefully won't create lots of surprises, but maybe, so what I'm going to talk about is just a few of them rather than all of them, but you may have other questions about some. So one of the key things was lack of role models. We only had one country in the world that had a woman as a head coach. So what could we do working with all the rugby unions around the world to start profiling women in coaching and lifting the profile so that if you see it, you can be it. So young girls, athletes saw that women were involved in coaching. So that was important, developing coaching role models. The recruitment process that appointed people into coaching positions at times across the world has not been good. A woman coach may have to put herself forward to a panel of 3 men. So the diversity in the recruitment process and the culture that goes on inside the organization to make it a welcoming environment that women want to be part of and don't think it's not any point in putting their name form. So the recruitment process is a problem. Players' perception, and I know many of you in this room may very well still be involved in playing, but it was one of our, and is one of the biggest challenges, given that most young women and men are coached by men. There was a perception and is a perception that women coaches aren't as good. And that's because people haven't experienced them. And so there's a real piece of work on working with players to actually say that women are great coaches and see it is kind of all linked together. And then the networks, women don't have the networks. This is a fantastic initiative. And it's something that we're really pushing for globally is to get women and men supporting each other within your country, within your club, because everyone needs that support, whether it's a one-on-one mentoring situation, but quite often women are in isolated situations and they just don't have that support. So I'll move to the next slide just to show some of the things that we've put in place. I'd like to say this is Leslie Mckenzie, who is the Japanese women's team national coach. And she has a variety of coaching experience from Canada and in New Zealand, and is working very, very closely with Kiko Asami in the Japanese Rugby Union to help develop the next generation of coaches as well. But what we decided was that there's not one solution to fix the problem. You needed to look at all the challenges and barriers that exist and try to address them in a holistic nature with interventions. So one of the things that we did, which was really important, was we established a global database of women in high performance coaching. We worked with the unions, like the Japanese Rugby Football Union, to identify who those coaches are that are on a pathway. And there are 7 women Japanese coaches that are part of a database of about 130 coaches now. All our interventions that we put in place, like training opportunities or deployment opportunities, go towards those women that the unions identify. We've done a lot to lift the profile. I think we've done about 50 profile pieces in our, what we say, Women in Rugby newsletters and on our social media channels of women who are coaching. And that is really got people starting to see it and believe it. And it is really vitally important. One of the really good initiatives that we talk about is making sure that there are opportunities for women to coach. And so whilst we said in 2017, there was only one team that had a woman in a head coach capacity, at this World Cup in New Zealand in September and October, we've created an internship program. So it's CIP is coaching internship program, so that every team that qualifies for that World Cup will have an extra accreditation for an additional female coach to go on the basis that they're integrated into the coaching teams. So that is another initiative. By the end of this World Cup, we will have a minimum of 12 additional coaches who have been coaching at a World Cup level. So there's a whole range of initiatives that we've put in place there. I think one of the most important things, though, is that you need to measure what you do. There is a lot of things that we do, but we need to see the change that happens in terms of more women getting the opportunities to actually coach. And so it's a long-term change, but we are very encouraged by how active the countries around the world have got in terms of putting women forward for positions. So hopefully that provides you with a bit of an insight to what we're trying to achieve globally.
Thank you, Katie, for that really clear and comprehensive summary of the work, the great work you are doing. It is really groundbreaking by an international federation, and you really are leading the way. I particularly love your holistic approach. Could you talk to us a little more about how you came to that approach?
Yes. I mean, I guess one of the things when we started our program was to look around the world and to look at what countries and unions were doing to develop coaches. And it became quite clear that there were thousands and thousands of women who had gone through training opportunities. So quite often what people assume is that the issue is the woman. It's the woman coach who has no confidence and who won't apply. And all the interventions were being focused around training women. And so what we had was thousands and thousands of women who were trained. And we needed to shift the focus from the individual woman to say, what is going on inside the organizations in terms of the culture and the processes that are put in place and in the wider society that is preventing these women getting through. So it's not a woman's issue. It's a society's issue in terms of the perception of women in leadership. And it is an organization's because of how they recruit and how they support. So the holistic nature is to do just that. One thing you may want to look at on our www.woman.rugby is we have a coaching toolkit where we have picked best practice from right around the world, and not just in rugby, in other sports, to look at how do you go about changing the culture inside, whether it be a club or a union or a country, to change the environment to encourage more women. So that's what we mean by holistic. It's not just training, it's that combination of solutions.
Yeah, absolutely love it. So you talk about on your website that you have some examples of good practice about creating a welcoming environment and culture, what do you think are the absolute key components
of
a welcoming environment in a club or a union or a federation?
Yeah.
Because I think this is absolutely the crux of it.
Yeah, I think it does depend on what level you're working in. So whether, you know, there are some fundamental things that are the same in clubs, and if you're talking about the coaching environment for an Olympic team. But it does come down to me in terms of trust and respect. I think that that is absolutely fundamental in any environment. If you do not have a situation where people trust and respect each other, you go into that blame, play below the line type of environment. So I think the base is getting to know and creating a supportive environment where people feel that they are safe from a psychological perspective to ask questions, that all questions are okay, that you create an environment where everyone really understands what it is that you're trying to achieve, so there's no hidden agendas, and that they also really understand and talk about what everyone's role is in terms of developing what it is they're trying to achieve. So getting those fundamental things, but to me, it starts with trust and confidence and respect.
That's fantastic, Katie. I think it's really beginning to spell out what an effective, welcoming environment actually looks like, because we talk about it, but we have very little evidence to say, well, what would we see and what would we hear would be happening in that kind of environment? And you're largely talking about people's behavior.
Absolutely.
The way that they express interest by questioning and listening and valuing individuals is absolutely critical. Have you seen a really effective environment anywhere in the world in rugby? And would you like to describe it if you think there is one?
I think things are changing. I mean, we all have our challenges, all our sports. I recently did a series of seminars for the women who are on our database on how do you build a high-performing culture inside a team. And I guess one of the welcoming environments I would put is, right now, I use as a case study, was the US Olympic Sevens team. And the way that they have created an environment which respects everyone's differences, that they developed a really interesting charter under the words of BRAVE, but it is all about how they work and respect each other. It is about how they recognize some of the women and the coaches are mothers and are at different stages in terms of their careers. So, you know, what might be right for one might not be right for all. So having things that they're working in a way that caters to individual motivations. But there's a saying that I use often. It's a little saying, which is P equals M times S times E, which is performance equals motivation times skills times environment. And if you look at that, and you look at that in terms of what you're trying to achieve to get great performance and support individuals, you know, what motivates that woman to be involved in coaching? Have you actually made sure that she has been given the right opportunities to learn the right skills to be able to perform her role? And what is the culture? What's the environment that is supporting her in terms of resources to make sure that she can excel?
P equals M times S times E. I like that. I have a feeling if I could see the audience, they would be just making a note of that. You touched briefly there about female coaches, mother coaches, which is really an important area. And when we talk to Helene in a minute, I know she's got some real insights around this area, herself being a successful elite coach and a mother. Is there anything that we can do in clubs and organizations, perhaps around policy, that would really help support mother coaches?
I think the thing is, you know, quite often some of these issues become issues because people don't feel comfortable to talk about them. And so rather than say, there are great women out there who want to get involved in coaching, but they're also mums, so they can't do it. You don't sit down and say, what can the club or the national organization put in place to enable you to do both? So thinking about policies in regards to childcare and support as part of the offer, to allow it to be a child-friendly environment. I know that we have several of our international teams in rugby who allow now their players and their coaches to bring their young children with them, recognizing that they're a part of their lives. So I think that the policy issue is about actually understanding, does it really detract from performance of a coach, or does you providing an environment where you feel that the coach has got that support network to wrap around the other things that impact on their ability to focus is really important.
Excellent. Katie, thank you. I'm just going to ask Massa at this moment. I wonder if there are any questions, Massa, that have come in from the audience that you might want to ask of Katie.
今まだ、クエスチョンの方は来ていないので、ぜひ皆さん、今までの話も含めて、Q&A セクションの方に、質問をいただければどんどん、聞いていきたいと思いますので、ぜひ、お話、質問をお願いします。そのまま、ポーリン今は続けてください。
We'll take that they are listening and believing and understanding every word that Katie is saying. So that's a fantastic story, Katie, and the work you're doing should be absolutely congratulated. It's that you're making some great inroads into this whole area. And you made some real key points about the actual practical steps we can take to help women feel more valued and supported. And I'm sure that the audience has a number of ideas that they will want to talk about later on during the morning. So at this point, may I then move over to Helene, and we can have a little chat. Helene, you've been sitting there very patiently. Now, Helene, for the benefit of the audience, I think perhaps we should explain a little bit about the sport of netball. I know it's not a major sport in Japan. There may be some areas that do take part, but if you could give a brief explanation of the sport, that would be great.
Yes, no problem. So netball, I think, in terms of understanding the sport, is very much like basketball. So what we try and achieve in the sport is scoring a goal through a basket at the end of a court. And the only difference there is that we don't have a backboard, so the hoop sits in midair. And the only other difference to basketball is we cannot run with the ball or dribble the ball. So every player on the court has a position and a role to play, but when we catch the ball, you must stop immediately and pass the ball on. So it becomes a very athletic game of speed, agility, and it's really exciting.
I think you've sold it, and netball may take off in Japan now. And maybe just explain how important netball is to New Zealand, because it really is the leading sport for women. So
yeah, so netball is the largest participation sport in New Zealand for women. and most girls in New Zealand have played netball at some time during their life. It is a sport that is led by women, coached by women, played by women, and internationally across the world, it is recognised first as a female sport, which is really exciting. And it also plays an important role for females around many countries, as it's a sport that females are encouraged to be a part of. In terms of netball in New Zealand, our international team is called the Silver Ferns, and we're currently the world champions of our sport. We have a fierce rivalry with Australia, England, Jamaica, and we enjoy international competition all year round. But I think the most important thing for netball is that we are all ambassadors for achievement in sport for women in our country, and our athletes are often recognised worldwide as international athletes, and so are our coaches. And our brand is really part of what we do, is ensuring that we are role models for female coaches and female athletes to know what it's like to be successful in sport. And we take that responsibility really seriously.
Thank you, Helene. And I know you are one of those exceptional role models yourself. So well done. So you mentioned that obviously netball is predominantly an all-female sport. And from what you heard that Katie was talking about in terms of creating this environment, what difference do you think it makes having an all-female sport with the support staff and the coaches being female as well?
I think one thing I know and have experienced in my career in netball is that when it's all female, it's a real collaborative environment. So when females are together working well, amazing things can happen. We don't have the resources of some other sports that are such as rugby. So our sport is built on a history of volunteering and women working together. So I think the mentality of our sport is we just get things done. It doesn't matter what obstacles are in the way. If we do it together, we can make amazing things happen. And I really feel that with my role as a professional coach in our national competition, elite competition, we support the Silver Ferns coaching, and the Silver Ferns coaching support us, and we grow together and collaborate together. So I think that opportunity to work together and really make great things happen because of the people is one of the things I love about being in an all-female environment.
That's really helpful. We're talking just now about mother coaches and how difficult it is for women in a lot of sports who have children to make a career in particularly high performance sport and coaching. Now, you've done that very successfully, Helene, and you will know many others in your position. What have been your personal challenges in that regard, and how have you overcome them?
Yes, I think the most challenging thing was how I balanced my own aspirations to be a high performance coach and being a really great mother at the same time, because learning to balance the responsibilities across both roles is challenging. So patience that you can step in and out of roles and learn from being a mother and learn while you get opportunities in your coaching role was a really good learning for me early on. But being in, I guess, netball, being a mother is celebrated. Many of my staff are mothers, including myself. And there is a understanding that to be a high performance coach, being a good mother is part of being a good high performance coach. So children are welcome in our environment at appropriate times. We don't discriminate against women who are mothers or who are in positions where they are pregnant. Young babies of my manager or my physio will be in my environment at appropriate times. And what I've found is by being open to motherhood and balancing motherhood and bringing the family into the high performance environment, it's really supported both myself and the people around me to be themselves and succeed. But I also want to say, I think we're very lucky to be able to be mothers and high performance coaches, because some of my greatest learning has come from my son, who is a special needs child because he has Asperger's. And through the learning of working with my son, I have learned to communicate and be a better coach. And I think we underestimate the role of being a mother and the skills that you learn as being a mother to be a successful high performance coach as well. So it should be celebrated.
Indeed. And so what you're saying is, if you walked into a netball arena where you're training athletes or coaching athletes, you would see young children of either you or your managers in that environment. And is there any childcare provided for those youngsters?
Yes, so there's childcare provided within our environment for athletes that have children. And when we travel, if I have some mothers in my team, when we travel, the support for the athletes to bring their children with them is provided, and we have a pregnancy clause and support within their contracts. The support for coaches and the staff comes from the philosophy and the culture of our sport and our organisation. So obviously there is times where having children isn't appropriate within the training environment, and then there's times where there are. So often we will work out a plan of support for staff before they come back into the environment to ensure that we can ensure the mothers are happy and healthy mothers, the children are happy and healthy children, and we can still be successful in our own jobs and with our own aspirations.
I just want to burst into applause right now, to be honest, Helene, because I do a lot of these sessions around the world and have been doing a number of them. And these examples are very few and far between. What you're talking about here is what Katie touched on. And it's not about fixing the woman, it's about changing the system. And you mentioned the word policy, clauses in contracts, changing the system. I mean, it's just a joy to listen to, and they're really practical examples for the audience that don't require a huge resource to make those changes. It's about the understanding of the individual needs of the coaches and the athletes. So that's fantastic. So can we just explore a little bit more about the factors that you think help create this environment for women to flourish? Because you currently are a mentor on a New Zealand program for high performance coaches. What are you seeing there that can really be put in place to help those women?
I feel very humbled and privileged to be part of the mentoring program here in New Zealand for aspiring high performance coaches. And I think it's, again, really unique to bring a network of aspiring coaches together across a number of sports where it's uniquely female. So the growth and the learning and the development that happens in that program is what females need, which is really, really exciting. We do have males in that course as well, in terms of mentors. And so I think it's fantastic that they can see what a unique female environment looks like for developing coaches. But what I think I've loved and I really cherish in that program is the connection that you make and the discussion that happens that's uniquely female. We have a perspective in sport. I think that is one of our strengths. It brings diversity of viewpoint, vision, understanding, questioning. And I think it's celebrated within that program, and it makes it a really safe space to share stories. Coaching stories are really powerful to learn, and women love sharing stories, and you can make connections. And knowing that you're not isolated and that what you experience as a high performance coach happens to other coaches and that you're not alone is very, very powerful. So I think that is one of the most powerful things I've experienced within the group. Even though I'm a mentor, I feel that same belonging to the other young aspiring coaches that I've met, and I learn as much off them as they do off me. The other thing I've noticed is that the sharing of stories normalizes some of the challenging experiences you have as a high performance coach. And if you're a female coach in a male dominated environment, you might feel isolated if the short stories aren't shared. So I think the normalizing of experiences that all coaches feel in terms of the challenges, the resilience that you need to survive in a high performance space, when you can normalize those experiences with other people, it gives you more confidence that you're doing really well and the journey is challenging for everybody. So that's been really fantastic.
That's a really interesting topic, and that discussion is happening globally about a all-female learning environment. There are always questions saying, should we run a mixed program or should we create a program just for women? And you've identified a number of the benefits of the program. Katie, can I just bring you in at this point? Because coming from a male-dominated sport and then creating a program or programs and support for women, you must have gone through that debate yourself about whether you should provide those all-female learning environments. Where did you get to on that?
I think where we are at is that you need to do both. We ran 2 years ago our first dedicated women's high performance coaching academy in Stellenbosch, and there was actually 2 Japanese women who were in that. And that, but we did the evaluation of that with the woman, thinking that we would maybe only do a dedicated only women's coach once, and it became quite clear that they wanted that to continue. But in this COVID environment, we've moved into, and so we will continually have dedicated women's, but we also do know that what we're trying to actually do is create diversity in coaching teams. So it's not just about women coaching women. And part of that is creating that absolute necessary respect that needs to exist, that women coaches have as much to offer in terms of the table. So we also run a virtual high performance academy, which is aimed for women and men, and they come together and they talk and they learn about the different challenges. So I think it's not, back to my holistic solutions, it's not just one opportunity. You need to be able to provide both and not say that one is more important than the other. They both have that value, but I think you need to be able to offer both if you're moving into an environment where you're with our sport, which maybe is a bit different from the netball, where we want women coaching men's teams as well.
Yeah, I mean, a great answer, and other evidence of what's happening in other sports around the world. What we've found in the work we're doing with the ICCE is it often depends on the objectives of what you're trying to achieve, which is what you mentioned. So if you're looking at trying to change the culture or the system, it's often really good to have a mixed group, because clearly we want a lot of masses around the world who are helping to change the system and be male champions. On the other hand, if you're looking to provide that safe space that you're talking about, Helene, for personal development, and then it's really key to give women the option of having an all-female environment. So great points, you two. So thank you for that. Helene, I'm just going to come back to you just to tease out a little bit more about the difference with a female sport, and just put you on the spot a little here and ask you, what lessons can we learn from netball for other male dominated sports? I mean, I know it's not all smooth and easy in the environment, and you might identify some challenges that you've had to overcome. But what might you take out as lessons for others?
I think it's really important to recognise the difference females and males bring to the table and celebrate the uniqueness of both viewpoints. So, you know, I've heard comments over the years in my coaching journey that females are too emotional and things, but I don't agree with that, because I think our EQ actually adds a unique perspective. And I think women can pick up on the nuances sometimes going on in the relational space very quickly. And a number of people that I've met over the years that have been coached by female coaches really celebrate the fact that they feel like the person is seen first and the athlete is then supported. So I think that's a unique skill that we should celebrate and bring to the table. But when I think you're in a mostly male environment, your ability to communicate skillfully is where we need to keep practicing. So it's not that it's not what we've got to say. We've got to be skillful in the way that we say it, so the response isn't that we're being too emotional, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that would be the challenge, I think, as a high performance female coach, where you're having high performance conversations driven that are factual and have information related to it that allows you to achieve what where you're trying to get to, that you need to use your intuition and the skills that we bring with the EQ that we have as females, and also just be skillful in the way that you communicate that.
Absolutely. I mean, I totally agree with you. There's been a lot of research done in the world of business, not so much in sport, that talk about the balance that you're expressing in terms of bringing the different strengths of males and females, and particular those softer skills that you mentioned around emotional intelligence and the ability to listen and understand are vital to the whole piece of jigsaw. Okay, so let's come back to Massa and see, have we stimulated any questioning in the audience at this point, Massa, that we can answer any questions? Hello, Massa?
ミュートでした。映像だけつけてミュートでした。すみません。はい。
Are there a number of questions? And,
はい、今来ておりますので、少し質問をさせていただきたいと思ってます。ですね、今大変、貴重な話をありがとうございますということで、日本ではなかなかそのサポートに関して、積極的でない部分があるということで、特にもう資金の面で この資金が確保されていなくて、なかなか女性のそのコーチが、なんていうんですかね、活動していくところのそのバックアップがなかなか難しいところもあるんじゃないかということがありました。で、ニュージーランドの場合には、そのどのくらいのその金銭的な支援、これはおそらくチームに対してというのも、社会としてということなのかもしれませんけど、子育てとか家庭の両立のための、マーケットとしてとかですね、そういうところで金銭的な支援がどういうふうな形でサポートが整っているのかっていうことについてお聞きしたいというのが、2つの質問をミックスしていきましたので、そういう質問が2個、金銭的なところの話が来ておりましたので、そこについて少しお話しいただければと思います。
Yes, thank you for that question, and it's a critical one. If I just start on this, and then Helene and Katie, if you want to come in. So after, like many countries in the world, there's been considerable lobbying of the government to make gender equality a priority in sport. And we're very fortunate here in New Zealand in that both our Minister of Sport and our Prime Minister have prioritized this particular area of women and girls in sport. And over the last 2 years, we have been able to make significant changes because there was some funding and policy behind what we're trying to do. Still a long way to go, and there's never enough funding for these types of things, but at least we've been able to identify some initiatives like the one that Helene is talking about, a high performance coach program for female coaches. And I wonder, Helene, if you want to speak any more about the funding aspect.
Yeah, so the Te Hāpaitanga program is a program that supports aspiring high performance coaches to be able to have the time to learn and grow as a coach. So they have a small amount of support, financial support, to be a part of that program. And that financial support gives them the opportunity to maybe put more time into their growth and learning. So I think, and that's really, really important. In terms of my journey, I don't think I've had what I would call financial support to learn about coaching as such until I got into a space of high performance. But one thing that I think is really important when I reflect on my journey is I always volunteered or interned or took up opportunities where I could observe coaching, support coaching in other roles, and being able to balance my family and children with that was really important at the time, hence why I believe in that now. And I could take part-time work while I was learning to be a coach.
Katie, would you like to add?
Sure. I guess the one thing that I would add is I don't live in New Zealand anymore. I live in Ireland working for World Rugby, but did live here for a long time. But in a rugby perspective, one of the things that we're challenging unions to do is to look at creating diversified income streams. And the IOC provides funding and support through its Olympic Solidarity, which is targeted at programs to get more women involved in coaching. So that's another avenue for tapping into. And given the fact that they're driving a gender equality change program, it certainly is an area that has been prioritized for assistance. So I would be working to see what you could get by working with your Olympic committee.
Thank you, Helene, Katie. Masa, any more questions?
はい。たくさん来ているんですが、いくつかにちょっと限定し、時間のこともありますので、少し限定しながらお話をさせていただきたいと思っているんですけども、面白い質問がありました。皆さんのその環境では、 女性コーチを育成する事業と立ち上げたりしたときに、女性コーチの環境を整えると、女性がここ見た場合の例えば男性の一般的な反応はどのようなものだったのか、最初にやろうとしたときのその社会の反応というかですね、いうものについてちょっとお聞かせいただければと思います。
Thank you for that question. Great question. Katie, I'm going to direct that to you initially.
Yeah. So coaching and the development of women in coaching is part of our commitment for leadership. So at a World Rugby level, we have made a very firm stance that we are into developing inspirational leadership in women on and off the field, and that we specifically have an agenda to talk about women in rugby as opposed to just women's rugby. So the committee that I work with has got the chairman of World Rugby, Sir Bill Beaumont, the vice chair, the chief executive of World Rugby, and also the male who's the chair of the Women's Advisory Committee is very high up in France, and then 4 absolutely amazing inspirational women leaders from around the world. But the men are totally embraced in terms of what we're trying to achieve in coaching, and have been really good at providing that support to ensure that we can do some really amazing things.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I think my response is often that we're not, when we're providing these programs for females, we're not discriminating against men. It's just a question of temporarily favoring a group who have historically been discriminated against, and it's an attempt to restore equal opportunities between the sexes. So I think it's a great question and one that needs to be debated. Massa, we think we've got time for one more.
はい。そうですね、もうそろそろ一つ最後の質問になるかと思いますが、今の質問に関係してなんですけども、先ほど男性についてのことを伺いましたが、女性の中にも例えば女性が特別な施策をしていくっていうこと自体に、拒否感というかそういうものを示す人がいるのではないかというようなことがあるのではないかと、そういう抵抗を示す女性の中にもですね、そのようなことについて何かお考えがありましたらお聞かせいただければと思います。
Helene, have you seen any responses like that in your work that you're doing?
I haven't personally seen any female resistance to the support around female coaches. In my experience here in New Zealand, I think that the language and the topic and the talk going on is just supporting female coaches to be skillful, high performance coaches. And we want to be recognised as high performance coaches, not regulated female high performance coaches who have got there because of programs and systems. So that's the talk going on with females. We're high performance coaches. We want to do a good job. We want to bring our skill set to the table, and that's really exciting.
And I think from my experience of running female leadership programs in sport, that although there may be some women initially who think it might be a bit strange to go on to female-only programs, I think once they are exposed to those, they understand that it is a different environment and it does help them grow in their confidence and ability to put their hands up for roles in the future. So thank you so much for all your questions. I know there's a number of others that are waiting, and I'm sure as the morning goes on, you will get the opportunity to discuss these. Just one final thing before I leave, Massa, I'd just like to show one opportunity to the audience. Some of you may have heard that there is an international working group on women in sport, and every 4 years there is a world conference. This will be held in New Zealand next year. The days are running down very quickly. And it'll be both a physical and a virtual conference for the first time. And it's going to be a huge number of people who will be coming together to discuss the very topics that we're discussing here today. So please look out for this conference, and if you're able to come to Auckland, either yourself or register online and be part of this global community of action towards gender equality in sport. So finally, I'd just like to thank both Helene and Katie for giving up their time and really outlining both their experiences from World Rugby's point of view and the fabulous work that, Katie, you're doing for women in rugby. And Helene, for your insights and explanation of your very personal approach to this topic and your own journey. It's really helped highlight a number of the issues. So thank you very much, and good luck to everybody today in your conference. Sayonara.
Sayonara.
ありがとうございました。皆様、ここではなかなかですね、直接聞こえないんですけども、皆様、画面の向こう側で拍手を、この3人の皆様にお願いしたいと思います。どうもありがとうございました。はい。